Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I'm just doing a random life update. I'm sorry I haven't posted many videos in a while. I have been living my life. I'm sorry I haven't posted many videos this year. Really, the main reason is because it has just been a poor reading year for me. I have not liked most of what I've read, so I haven't really had a lot of booktube videos to do because I don't have many books to review because I haven't gotten far into many of them. A lot of DNFs this year. I do feel guilty about that because I would like to be able to do thorough reviews for you guys and give every book I read a chance, but I just think a part of the problem is I am really like a mental health reader. There are like mood readers, but I am more like a mental health reader. There are just times when I just do not want to read. I am not in the mood for reading. I do not like what I read, and I don't like a lot of what I read to begin with. So if I'm just like not in the mood for reading, I just don't do it. I mean, reading is not really like my number one passion in life. There are other things I enjoy a lot more than reading. Reading is kind of a little bit more of a task for me. And a lot of what I read from the standpoint of a writer. So I'm analyzing a lot of what I read. So I don't really read so much for like pleasure. I read more almost in terms of like studying how these other writers did it, why they did what they did, whether I like what they did, whether I want to borrow that and use that in my own writing, or if that is something I want to avoid. And this is kind of why I think a lot of reading has become very difficult for me. I was watching a video with Orson Welles, the director, and he was talking about how he does not really enjoy a lot of movies so much anymore. He doesn't enjoy it in the same way he used to before he became a filmmaker. And the reason is because after becoming a filmmaker, every movie he sees it from the perspective of a filmmaker. So when he watches a movie, he wonders like, why did they put the camera here? Why did they put this light source here? Why did the camera pan this way or whatever? So he's analyzing everything from the standpoint of a filmmaker. In the same way, I analyze really everything I read from the standpoint of a writer. So I look at books and I don't just enjoy it for what it is. I look at it and I'm wondering like, why did they use this word? Why is this paragraph here? Why did they start the chapter with this? Why do they have this needless dialogue here? This piece of information doesn't like push the plot or the storytelling or the setting or the characters or whatever. It's just a needless sentence. So I really analyze everything from the standpoint of a writer, and that makes it real difficult to enjoy it. There are still some books that I definitely like, and I could see the person writing it is definitely a skilled writer. Even if I don't really like it myself, I could tell like, okay, this person at least knows what they're doing. They have talent. But for a lot of books I read, especially because I read a lot of classics, it's just difficult to enjoy because I read so much of it and I'm just not really in love with it. I'm just like, why is this person a beloved author? Why is this book a classic piece of literature? I think it's a piece of crap, I don't like it at all. Another thing that I think makes it worse on top of that for reading for me is how do I say? I think this has to go back to like my high school days. In school, I was very much a loner and like, a loser or whatever. I was kind of a little bit of a nerd, and I was one of the ones who was always like in the cafeteria at a table to myself. So as a result, I do not really like any kind of popular stuff. Like the popular kids in school, I was kind of like, I kept a distance from them. I just didn't like them. I didn't like their popularity. I'd look at them and I'd be like, why are they popular? They're not really even funny. They're not smart, so why are they popular? And so as a result, I kind of don't like popular things like popular music, popular movies, whatever. If something is real popular, if everyone is raving about it, that will like be a disincentive for me to check it out. I do not really like popular things. I like, I relate with more, the loners and the losers and the weird people sitting alone in the corner. Those are my people. So as a result, a lot of the books I read are like literary classics. So these are like beloved books. So the books I mostly read are the popular kids in school. And I don't really like those kind of things. You know, I like the loners, the ones just alone in the corner, the ones who are not recognized, because to me, those are the interesting ones. Because I'm like, no one has ever really talked to this person, so who are they? They probably have a great story to tell. They probably have a real interesting life, and they'd probably really appreciate maybe, someone going up to them. I don't know. Maybe not that, because I mean, we're kind of introverts. We kind of like to be left alone in a way. But yeah, so the books I would probably relate with more, the books I may like have more affection for, are books that are more undiscovered, not literary classics. So that's kind of like a flaw in what I choose to read. But the reason I read so many literary classics is because I want to examine from the standpoint of a writer what all these great books, I want to read all these great beloved books and find out what they were like, whether I like them, and like I say, whether I want to incorporate parts of them into my own writing, or whether I want to do something different. So that's why I read a lot of classics, because again, I kind of read it from the standpoint of studying it from the viewpoint of a writer. But anyway, I'm going on way too much about this. I'm sorry. This is going to be very much just kind of a rambling video. So yeah, I apologize. So anyway, the point of all that was to just kind of explain why I'm not reading so much and why I do not enjoy a lot of what I read. And in terms of the mental health thing, I struggle with like, depression and anxiety and stuff. And so I am really much, how do I say it? I have several hobbies that I use to kind of cope, to kind of, alleviate depression and stuff. So, I have my bird, and I have, music. I'm into music. I like watching some movies. But also, writing. Writing is a major, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess outlet for me. Writing is an outlet, an emotional outlet or whatever. I just enjoy writing. I always, well, not always, but writing is a major outlet for me. It's a way, just for good for my mental health. God, that's terrible grammar. Writing is good for my mental health. That's what I'm trying to say. It's just good for my spirit. My spirit wants to write. My spirit does not so much want to read. Especially nowadays, I kind of feel like a lot of books, I've kind of gotten a sense of like how people write and how I want to write, the kind of writer I want to be. So I'm kind of finding less value in reading nowadays, because I know how I want to write books. I know what I enjoy. I know my style better now. So I don't really need to read so much to like develop my style, even though I do still think it's always good. You can always develop and you can always improve. But I basically feel at this point that the stories I write are more interesting, and I guess from my standpoint, my subjective standpoint, my biased standpoint, the books I write are better than all these books I read, or most of the books I read. So I just enjoy writing more than reading, and I get more out of writing than reading, and it's just better for my mental health. I'm more productive writing than I am reading. That does change though. I do have moments, like years, where I am more into reading, like around 2017 or so. I think I read something like over 200 books, and at the time I did not write for like almost a 3-year period. But now it's completely flipped. I've been writing like crazy, editing like crazy, and reading has taken a back seat. And between the two, I will always prioritize writing over reading. Okay, but let's kind of begin with like a recent book haul, I guess. It's not going to be a big book haul at all, but just kind of the more recent books I've gotten that I haven't talked about on this channel. One that I do plan to do a video on is this book called Stamped for Kids, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by People. I have some things to say about this book. I saw this in the bookstore, and again, I don't want to go too much in depth about this because I plan to probably do a video just reviewing this one book. But I saw this book in the bookstore, and I just opened it up, and I think I read the first sentence, and right away I was just like, okay, I have some things to say about this book. So what I did is I bought it, and I'm like, I highlight it with a marker because like passages I want to talk about. I have some things to say about this book, and it will definitely be political. So I will like put a warning on that video when I post it, like this is going to be political stuff in this video. Otherwise, I kind of want to avoid that if I can, because I'd like to be able to have videos where everyone can enjoy them regardless of like your political views or whatever. Because I think, you know, my opinion is, or whatever, is that you probably watch BookTube to kind of get away from all the crap of the world. You know, you want to just read something you enjoy. You don't want to have all the political crap going on in life to, you know, just be weighing you down. You know, you want to get away from that. And books are an escape. That's why, you know, so many people like reading, because books are an escape. So I don't really want to focus too much on politics, but for this video, I'm definitely going to have to delve into that. And I look forward to that, but I did like 20 pages or whatever of this book, like highlighting it, and I needed to stop because I was just like, I would have turned into the Hulk. But yeah, I'm eager to do that video. I have some things to say. Next, a couple books I just got are a couple copies of Keeping Strong in a video. I think I haven't posted it yet, but I mentioned that I don't have copies of my own books. Like I only have, I think, 1 or 2 of my books, my published books, and I think I've published 6 and I only have 2 of them. So what I'm trying to do is kind of slowly buy copies of my own books. So I bought 2 copies of Keeping Strong. This is the second book in the Samuel Creed series. There's already things I see that I want to change, like the font there, I'd like to make that smaller. The font on the back, I'd like to make that smaller. I could always do edits of my books though, and that I could make like a separate video on that, and just I could always edit. I could always rewrite my books. You know, I could always do that, but I kind of don't want to do that because I don't want to go into it too much. But basically the long and short of it is I don't want to keep working on my old books because I'd like to work on other books, books I have not written, books I have not finished, whatever, and finish those books and publish those books, not just constantly be tweaking all my old books, because I would never finish. I'd always be editing. I'd always be going back, always changing it, and I'd never get anything done. So yeah, that's why I don't really like editing my books. Once I publish my books, I kind of try to forget about them. I just erase them from my memory. They are done for me, and I move on. But anyway, 2 copies of Keeping Strong. I got this next book because it's on the top 1000 list, 1000 Books to Read Before You Die by James Mustich, and I bought a copy of this book at the bookstore, but I found out then it's actually the second book in the series that I got. So it's actually a trilogy, but it's the Kristen Lavransdatter trilogy. This book is The Bridal Wreath by Sigrid Undset, Undset. So yeah, I do not know if I'll enjoy this book at all. I don't really imagine that I will. I just kind of imagine it's, you know, probably like some kind of gothic women's fiction or something, so just boring. But it is a top 1000 book, and this is book 1, so I think the trilogy is on the top 1000 list. I'm not sure. It may just be the first book in the trilogy on the top 1000 list. So I do not really have plans to read the whole trilogy if I do not like this book. If I do not like this book, I'm just going to quit on the trilogy. Next, this is a book that I definitely knew I wanted to get, but I just really haven't until recently. Oh, I did not mention my birthday at all. I need to remember to do that. But anyway, so my birthday was coming up, and I was kind of like, what should I get myself? You know, maybe a couple birthday presents for me. So I thought, oh, I should buy this book. So I finally got it. But it's America Fantastica by Tim O'Brien. I thought this book was actually coming out like this year, but I think it actually released last year. I'll talk about Tim O'Brien quite a little bit on this video, but Tim O'Brien is one of my favorite authors for his book The Things They Carried. Definitely remember that name, The Things They Carried. Absolutely love that book. And I have several books by him up here. So there's July July, signed copy of that. Tomcat and Love, signed copy of that. By the way, I've read or tried to read July July. I didn't really like it too much. Tomcat and Love, have not started that one yet. In the Lake of the Woods, a signed copy of that. I loved that book as well. I thought that was pretty much a masterpiece. A masterpiece, even though it is quite different from the things they carried. I really enjoyed it. Going After Cassiato, a signed copy of that, which I'll get into as well soon. But anyway, so Tim O'Brien is kind of a must-buy author for me. So this book is not signed, but it's his most recent book. I think July July was his next most recent book. And I think he hasn't written or published any books in like, I don't know, 15 years or something like that. I think July July kind of got some bad reviews, and it may have like, I don't know about this at all if it's true or not, but it may have like discouraged him from writing for like a decade. I do not know if that's true at all, but he has not published any books since July July until this one. So America Fantastica, I do not know anything about it whatsoever. I do believe it is a novel, however. Tim O'Brien kind of writes some nonfiction and also fiction. And what I really like about what he does is he blends fiction and nonfiction. So he blends truth and fiction. And I just think he does it masterfully. And also he writes about the Vietnam War so well. I do not know if this book is going to be about the Vietnam War, but I imagine it is. It's kind of just a theme of Tim O'Brien's books. But anyway, so I got a hardcover of it because I do imagine I will keep it, just because every Tim O'Brien book is kind of a must-buy for me and a must-have or whatever. If I just do not like it, I might get rid of it because it's unsigned, so it's kind of like, well, I don't really need it. But I bought a hardcover just kind of, imagining I'm going to keep it. Last on the book haul, oh well, there is actually one more book kind of on the book haul, but I'm gonna get to that a little bit later. But at work the other day, I was working in the back, working with the online books, and I heard a customer come in and selling books to the bookstore owner, and she mentioned something about the things they carried signed, and so my ears were like, one, because the things they carried, and two, because signed. So, I mentioned all the Tim O'Brien books that I have, and the things they carried was my absolute favorite. So when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, is she bringing in a signed the things they carried? I'm gonna freak out. So I did a little bit more work, and then about 5 minutes later I came out, and she was still there, and I was kind of like, did I overhear something about a signed Tim O'Brien things they carried book? And so the bookstore owner was like, yep, and he showed it to me, and I asked him how much, or I think I said like, okay, I'm going to have to get that in installments, because I just imagined the book would be like $400 or $500, and I would have paid that, because the things they carried to me is just a classic. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It might be my favorite book of all time. It is, if it is not my favorite book of all time, it's my second favorite book. My favorite book, by the way, it's hidden behind here, but The City of Dreaming Books by Walter Moores. Either that or The Things They Carried is my favorite book of all time, and it'd really just be by a hair. So I asked him how much he'd want for it, and I think at the time he may have said 125 or 150, and so I said sold. So the lady kind of chuckled like, wow, it already sold that quick. But anyway, so a couple hours later, I'm working and kind of wrapping up my work, about to leave for the day, and so the bookstore owner, he gives me the book, and I was like, what did you want for it? Did you want 125? And he said, no, 100 is fine. So I got it for that. So anyway, so it's The Things They Carried, a signed first edition Franklin Library edition. So basically Franklin Library, they have like some signed edition books, like they just do signed editions for people. So that way it's also good because it's a genuine autograph, because it's a signed edition book. So it's not just a regular book with a signature in it. It is a specific signed edition book. And I have several books from this publisher. But anyway, so I'm super excited about that. A signed copy of The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. Really, if not my favorite book, my second favorite book by only a hair. I think it's just such a perfect, masterful book, a work of art. I've done a review of it on my channel, but I'm not really actually going to post it because I've pretty much said everything I already said in that video. It's a work of art. I think it's just brilliant. It's perfect. It's masterfully written. I think Tim O'Brien is a genius, really. It's just so good, so well written. And the first chapter, I was just like, okay, this is a masterpiece. I know it. So I'm really excited to have a signed copy of it. I looked online, just curiosity, what this book was actually going for. So for like this actual edition book, I see it ranging everywhere from $100 to up to like $350. So $100 I think is a pretty fair price for it. And you know, like I said, I would have paid $400 or $500 for this one. I was planning to pay in installments, you know, just like $100 for like 4 months or whatever. But I'm real glad I got it for that price. I think that's a steal. I absolutely would not pass on that. I am not going to pass on getting a Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien signed book. Absolutely love it. Stoked to have it. It might now be my favorite signed book of all time. I need to do a video like my 10 favorite signed books. That would be a real difficult video to do, but this book might be #1 now. I don't know. I do also have a William Goldman signed book, but it's not a Princess Bride, so I still think this has to be #1 probably. Okay, next let's get into books I'm currently reading. So again, you know, I am really having a down reading year, but I'm trying to make up for it and I'm trying to get back into reading and read more diligently. Now, I have had to quit on several more books. So at the beginning of the year, I did a video, 24 books to read in 2024. And it's actually like my most viewed book-related video on BookTube. My most viewed videos are all like bird or cat videos. Those are apparently popular. Those all get like 1,000+ views. But my 24 books to read in 2024 video is my most viewed video, book related stuff. And so I kind of feel a little bit more pressure to finish reading my 24 books to read in 2024 because, you know, I figure, you know, I need to post, you know, the recap of it, the summary of it, the actual review of those books. And I do enjoy doing those videos a lot, but it's going to be kind of a poor video, I think, because there's going to be so many 1-star videos. I mean, so many 1-star reviews, just because I just haven't liked so much of what I've read this year. I'm just not really in a reading mood, and the books I chose to read, I just haven't enjoyed. So I'm really kind of pessimistic about that video now. Currently, of 24 books to read in 2024, 15 of them are going to be 1-star reviews. And I think they're all DNFs. Maybe one isn't, I don't know. But I think maybe 15 DNFs, 15 1-star reviews. There's one 4-star book and one 5-star book. And then the rest, I think 7 books I'm currently reading or need to read. So what I did last night is I plotted out, or whatever, mapped out how many pages I need to read of each book to finish them all by the end of the year. So currently I'm actually reading all of these books, and some of them I just added to the list yesterday because I'd like to, you know, do my 24 books to read in 2024 video by the end of the year. So I'd like to finish all of these books by the end of the year, whether I finish reading them all the way through or whether I DNF them and for whatever reason. So anyway, the books I am currently still reading, and they're all, I think, off the 24 books to read in 2024 list, are Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. I always used to pronounce it Heinlein, but the bookstore owner was mentioning it, the author, the other day at the bookstore, and I forget how he pronounced it. It wasn't Heinlein. Heinlein? I don't know. I think it might have been Heinlein is how he was pronouncing it. but Stranger in a Strange Land. So this is like science fiction. And I've read a few science fiction books this year. Orson Scott Card Ender's Game, and what was his first name? Asimov. Was it Isaac Asimov, right? Foundation. And so this is another science fiction book. I'm not a fan of science fiction. And I'm liking it okay so far. I'm not too far into it. The main thing I really like about this book so far is the actual like language of the book. Like just the phrases they use, some of their vernacular they use. I really like some of it. It just seems like vernacular from, I don't know when exactly, 1930s, 1940s, 1920s, whatever, that kind of era. They just had some expressions and some phrases that I've never heard before, but it's just kind of like, oh, that's kind of a cool little phrase or whatever, or just the way they spoke is really, I don't know, I like it. So that makes it really unique, and I just like reading those older expressions that, I wonder if those expressions were like real common at the time, or if like these authors just kind of came up with them trying to be cute or whatever. So I wonder which it is, if people actually really talk this way back then. But it's just really interesting to read all these little expressions and whatever. There is one of them that I'm not really liking, which is this word grok. And what it reminds me of is A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess, where Burgess really made up his own words for a lot of it. And for that book, I really liked it, or, it wasn't easy, like 75% into Clockwork Orange. I wasn't liking the language at all. But then toward the end of the book, I really began to learn the language, and I liked it all of a sudden. But Heinlein, or how do you pronounce it? Heinlein. He uses his word grok, and it seems to mean several different things, and I just don't really enjoy it. I just think it's kind of stupid, so I'm not liking that part of it, but it's not enough so far to detract from the rest of the book. So anyway, so far I'm liking it well enough. I'm not near DNFing it so far. I like it pretty well. I think the plot's moving along pretty well. I think the pacing is pretty good. Some of the characters, especially like I say, just the way they talk is real interesting. So not at all near a DNF yet, but I'm enjoying it so far. So just off the top of my head, it might be heading toward a 3-star review, potentially a 4-star review. Depending on how it goes, I guess it could bump up to a 5-star, but so far, kind of more 3-star territory. I think it's okay so far. I'm enjoying it. Next is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I don't know how to pronounce her name. I never know how to pronounce anything. For this book, I've heard a lot of booktubers and also readers raving about this book. Rebecca, I guess, one, it's a popular book in its own right, but also just people really commending Daphne du Maurier. A lot of people really like her writing, so that added extra, expectations. And I wanted to like it because of that. And so reading it, first I want to say I read somewhere that this book has one of the best opening lines like ever. And so I read the first line and I was just kind of like, that's supposed to be a great line? I don't think that's a good line at all. But I read the first chapter and the second chapter, and I thought it was really quite masterful in a way. The main thing that stood out to me was just the voice of the narrator. I could just really picture in my head this narrator's voice just talking. It's kind of like a movie that begins with just narration. And so that's how I kind of imagine this. Like, I know they've made several movies of this. So I kind of read books like imagining it based on a movie, or like I imagine sitting in a movie theater watching the movie. That's kind of how I imagine a lot of things. That's also how I write. I imagine I'm watching the movie of what I'm writing. But anyway, so the writing, especially for the first and second chapter, I thought was really, oh God, what's a word I'm looking for? Expression. I think evocative. I think that's the word I'm looking for. It was real evocative writing, so I just really imagined this narrator's voice in my head, and I really like that. So I thought, okay, this is probably going to be maybe a 4 or 5 star territory, you know? But the couple chapters after that have been just kind of blah. I don't know, it's just not really appealing to me too much. The last chapter I read, I liked pretty well. I think the last chapter was like, I think it's going to be like the main guy, like the husband. I don't really know much about this plot at all, just kind of real fragmented pieces I've seen. So all I really know about the book is that there's this house, and I guess, you know, this woman is like this, going to be this guy's second wife, I think. And I think his first wife was the titular Rebecca, and I think she may have died. And I guess just something about Rebecca kind of haunts the house. And that's all I really know about this book. So the last chapter I read was her, I think, meeting the guy who will wind up being her husband. And I thought it was actually a pretty decent chapter again. So like the first 2 chapters, I was like, okay, potential 5 star book. The third chapter maybe was kind of like, meh, not really liking it. And beginning the chapter where they meet, she meets her future husband or whatever, that kind of made me think, okay, maybe there is some potential to this book after all. But I don't know. I'm really kind of on the edge. It could be a book that soon gets DNF'd because the writing is kind of difficult. It's kind of just wordy, and I don't know. I'm really iffy about this book. And I'm trying to give it every chance in the world because so many people have raved about this book. And one thing I will say, no matter what I think about the book, I will still say you should probably read it because so many people have enjoyed this book. So irrespective of my own views, this is probably a book everyone should read since so many people have liked this book. Next, this is not a book on the top 1000 list, but it's Michael Crichton, The Terminal Man. So at this point, I think there's only maybe 2 Michael Crichton books I have not read yet, The Terminal Man and Sphere. He also published several books, I don't know how many, like somewhere near 10 books under a pen name, and that's kind of how he started out, mainly writing like medical related books because Michael Crichton was like a medical doctor of some kind. So I have only read one of those books under the pen name, but otherwise every book under Michael Crichton's name I have read, except The Terminal Man and Sphere. So this is the older one, so I'm reading it. I'm not too far into it. I don't know, maybe a 15% into it or so. And Michael Crichton is very much a hit or miss author for me. And so far, this one is really on the edge of that. I do not think it will be at all one of his best hits, but it might be more the tail end of his hits for me. So I'm liking some of it pretty well, some of the pacing. I think Michael Crichton was real decent earlier on in his writing at pacing, and he just had some cliffhangers and he had some twists and turns and just some intrigue. But then as he developed, he began writing more, I don't know what to call them exactly, but a lot of science stuff thrown into books, a lot of like techno stuff, and also like a lot of politics, and also whatever else, like racism or terrorism or the environment or whatever. He kind of more wanted to tell his opinion about certain things. So I like a lot of his older stuff because he's just writing it more in terms of like pacing and page turner stuff, not so much like political hit pieces or trying to get his views out on the environment or whatever. So I like some of his older writing pretty well. But this one might be kind of on the lower end of that. There's definitely been a couple other books he wrote earlier in his life that I like more than this one. But I'm enjoying it okay. It's not near a DNF yet. But I am still kind of thinking, you know, I'm not super enjoying this book. I'm not in love with it. It's probably not going to be in the top 3 favorite books by him. But it's still decent enough so far. Next is Beloved by Toni Morrison. Again, just about 15% into it or whatever. This is a book I began several years ago and I put it aside. I was reading it from the library and I had to return it, but I hadn't gotten it since then. But my recollection of it was I thought there was potential in it, so I did not DNF it. I planned to begin reading it at some point. But you know, I finally bought a copy of the book so I could get back into it. And part of what raised expectations for me is a lot of people, again, have commended this book and Toni Morrison as an author. So that, again, gave higher expectations for it. So I began reading it, and again, my first impression from reading it years ago from the library was the book had potential. So far, I'm really kind of iffy on this. I'm a little bit more pessimistic than optimistic. I mean, yeah, I think there are some good qualities of the book, and I say that really unhappily, I guess. I don't know. I'm really undetermined about this book. But just like with the Rebecca book, you know, a lot of people do like this book and do like this author. So it is probably a book you should read, irrespective of my opinion. But so far, I'm not thinking this is definite 5-star masterpiece level. I have some issues with it. I just think some of the writing is just not altogether that good. Some of the storytelling just isn't altogether that good. The characters, I don't even know like how old a lot of them are. Bird. So, I don't know. I have some issues with the book, but it's okay so far. But it might be a potential soon DNF if I run into a couple more chapters that I'm just not liking at all. Next, this one, there's kind of a story to this one, but the next book I had on my 24 books to read in 2024 list was Cloud Splitter by Russell Banks. I don't know if I've mentioned him already in this video or not, but he has this book Cloud Splitter, which is a real large book, but I have not started it yet. But I think I may have given this one like a 5-star projection because I read Russell Banks's book, The Sweet Hereafter, a couple years ago, and I absolutely loved that book. I thought it was just a beautiful book. Again, another work of art, The Sweet Hereafter. It's a book on the top 1,000 list. I didn't know anything about it or the author, and so it just kind of came out of nowhere. Like I read the, thank you, babe. I read the first chapter and I was like, ooh, this is actually pretty good. And just the whole rest of the book, it's just a beautiful book, a beautifully written story. So Russell Banks, because of it, kind of became a must-buy, must-read author. I had 2 other signed books by him, Affliction and... Gosh, I'm losing my mind. The Reserve. Affliction and The Reserve. But anyway, I was working in the bookstore one day and I saw this book on the new arrivals. And so I was like, oh, Cloud Splitter, Russell Banks. I don't have that book. I should get that. And so I opened it up and I saw that it is signed. So, you know, that was like, you know, I already was going to buy the book anyway because it's a Russell Banks book that I did not have. And so I saw it was signed, and so I mentioned it to the bookstore owner because I saw the price was only $7.95. And so I was like, hey, did you see this one is signed? And he looked at it and he's like, oh, I missed that. So he kind of like nudged it back to me and I was like, you know, do you want more for it? And he was like, no, you saw it for that price, so go ahead and take it. So it's been sitting on my to-read shelf because it's on my 24 books to read in 2024, and I've kind of been saving it toward the end because it's a book I have a lot of expectations for. Basically, I'm reading them from my least anticipated order, the least anticipated book, to my most anticipated book. That may have been a mistake in hindsight because I began the year by reading all the books I did not really have high expectations for, the books I had low expectations for. And as a result, I think that may have kind of made me not enjoy reading this year because all the books I started out with are all books that I just did not really want to read. So I think that was a mistake. So I do not think I want to do that again, reading my least anticipated books first, because then it just makes me think, I don't like this book, I don't like this book, I don't want to read this book, I don't want to read this book. And so as a result, it just kind of steamrolled or whatever. But anyway, so Cloud Splitter. So, I finally caught up to it where, it's about time for me to read this book, and it's pretty much a new book. So I was like, you know what? I don't want to read this book because it's so big. If I try to read it, I'm going to break the spine and all that, and the book will look terrible. It looks pretty brand new as it is, and it's signed. So I decided to buy an unsigned copy of this book from online. So I did that just a couple weeks ago. I bought an unsigned copy of the book, so I won't have to worry about destroying it. And so it finally came in just a couple days ago, maybe yesterday. So I got it from the post office, and I opened it up, and I saw it's actually signed as well. So I bought this book so I'd have an unsigned copy of it, so I could, not worry about destroying it or whatever, not worry about breaking the spine, not worry about damaging it. And lo and behold, it just happens to be signed as well. So once I saw that, I was kind of like, oh no, because what do I do now? Do I buy another book hoping it's unsigned? Or what? Do I just read this book? Thank you, baby. So I think So I only bought this book for like $4, maybe even $3. I don't know. So I think what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and read this book, even though it's signed, and I'll wind up damaging it, somewhat. I already have a signed copy of this exact book. So yeah, it's just kind of funny how that worked out, that I wanted to get an unsigned copy, so I bought one and then found out it's signed as well. So what that also does is, what do I do once I finish this book? I mean, do I trade it into the bookstore or not? Because if I trade it into the bookstore, he'll probably only sell it for like $9, because one, it's a paperback and it's not really a expensive book or whatever. Even signed copies of this book are like, $15, $20. So it's not an expensive book at all, even if signed. So I don't know, I may trade it into the bookstore, but I may only get like $3 for it or $5 for it or something like that. So it's kind of like, do I want to get rid of a signed book for just $5? One of my favorite authors of all time, For the Sweet Hereafter, a signed book by him. I don't want to really get rid of a signed book for just $5. But part of the problem is it's a real big book, and I already have a copy of this exact book signed. So it's like, do I want to have it just taking up shelf space? I don't know. So I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Just kind of frustrating. I buy the book to be unsigned so I could read it and get rid of it and damage it and whatever. It doesn't care. And it's signed. So now it's like, oh, great. What do I do with it now? So anyway, but yeah. So I'll begin reading this book, the signed copy, and yeah, save this one, the other one, the newer one, for a collectible. Next, I began reading this one last night, and I think this was my most anticipated read for the year, but it's Going After Cassiato by Tim O'Brien. So Tim O'Brien, already mentioned him on the channel, or on this video, the author of The Things They Carried. That was one of my favorite books of all time. The bookstore owner, his favorite book by Tim O'Brien, really maybe one of his favorite books of all time, his favorite book on the Vietnam War, and the bookstore owner fought in the Vietnam War, is Going After Cassiato. He loves this book. It's his favorite Tim O'Brien book. And so he sold me the signed copy of Going After Cassiato. I don't know what I paid for that. Maybe, I don't know. But the bookstore owner actually met Tim O'Brien at a book signing and talked to him. And they talked about like their service in the Vietnam War. I'm really jealous about that because I wish I could meet Tim O'Brien because I think he's a genius. I think he's brilliant and all that. But anyway, one day I saw the signed copy of Going After Cassiato like in a cabinet, like a locked cabinet with some more expensive books. And right away I knew I had to get that. But just like with the Russell Banks book, I wanted to get this book so that I could read a book and not worry about damaging it, because I don't want to damage the Going After Cassioto book. I think it's a first edition and signed. So I got the paperback just thinking, okay, you know, I could destroy it. You know, it doesn't really matter. It's just a whatever book. And so last night, there's a price, $6.95. I opened it up to begin reading it, and I saw that it is signed as well. So just my luck. I buy these books thinking, okay, I'm going to get an unsigned copy so I could read it and not worry about damaging it. Because, you know, for signed books, I want to treasure them. I don't want to damage them. I want to protect them. And so Going After Cassioto, real popular book for the bookstore owner. Like, he swears by it. It's his favorite book on the Vietnam War. And Tim O'Brien, I think, is a brilliant author. His two most famous books really are The Things They Carried and Going After Cassioto. So I'm really super excited about reading this book. Major high expectations. Like, could this book be even better than The Things They Carried? So I had the signed copy, and then I got this, and then find out this is signed as well. So when I go back to the bookstore next week to work, I'll probably buy another copy of Going After Cassioto, but I will check it to make sure it is not signed. So I guess I'm going to keep both of these books and not read them. I have already started reading this one, but I've been very delicate with it because I don't want to break the spine or anything, because again, this book is like new. So I read the first chapter, or not the first chapter, but kind of like the first scene or whatever, the first 10 pages or so, and I liked it really well. It had a lot of shades or whatever of The Things They Carried. Like, the first chapter felt very much like The Things They Carried. So far, I imagine it's going to be a 5-star book. Tim O'Brien writes about the Vietnam War so well. So I love Tim O'Brien. I think he writes about the Vietnam War very well. And this is a book about the Vietnam War. So probably a definite 5-star book. And again, it's just so funny. It winds up, it's signed. So now I can never get rid of this one either. And I got to get another Going After Cassioto book. So yeah. There is actually another copy of at the bookstore of, I think, Tomcat and Love signed. But I already have one, so I'm not going to get it. But yeah. Last on the currently reading, I meant to start reading this book in bed last night, but I read like the cast of characters and it almost put me to sleep. Not to give the book any discredit or whatever, maybe I was just sleepy. I don't read much in bed anymore. Pretty much once I get in bed, I'm out. But it's World's End by T.C. Boyle. This is not a book on the top 1,000 list, but it was one of my most anticipated books for my 24 books to read in 2024, and it's signed. So the backstory behind this book, I wanted to get a T.C. Boyle book just because I've like heard of the author before. I don't know where I've heard of him, but it just sounds like a real familiar name to me. So, you know, I think I saw that, you know, there were signed books, you know, including this signed book at the bookstore. And I always kind of would have my eye on it whenever I'd pass by the bees section. I'd always kind of look at it and just, you know, it's a new book and it's a big book. So it's just, and it's signed, and I'm such a sucker for signed books. So I'd always pass it by and just kind of thinking, T.C. Boyle, why does that name sound so familiar? And it's like, I kind of want to get that book, but I've never heard of it. It's not a top 1,000 book. But, you know, after months and months of passing it by, you know, I finally looked up like T.C. Boyle on Wikipedia to see like, what is he most famous for? Where do I know that name from? And it said on Wikipedia, I think his most famous book is World's End, which is the signed one that they have at the bookstore. I don't know if they have another signed book by him. But anyway, so I wanted to read him for a while, and it helps that this is his most renowned book, I guess, one of his more popular books. And yeah, and it's signed, so real, I don't know about high expectations, but I'll definitely try to like the book. I'll give the book every chance in the world to work for me because I want to like the book. I don't want to have a signed book by an author or a book I hate. You know, I want to like this book. I want it to be one of my favorite books of all time. So it's really just up to the author. Can you do it? Can you write a good book? Because I'm going to try to like this. So anyway, it's one of my most anticipated reads. I have not started it yet, but I do plan to try to start it today. So yeah. So yeah, this is my currently reading list. Beloved, The Terminal Man, Rebecca, Stranger in a Strange Land, World's End, Going After Cassiano, and Cloud Splitter. I think that's all I'm currently reading. Oh, I still haven't mentioned the Disciple thing yet. I guess I should do that now. So one of the things I did recently is I went to a concert and, oh, how do I tell this story? A few months ago, maybe 5 months ago, I posted on Disciple's Facebook page, probably my favorite band in the world, Disciple. They're like a Christian rock band. I saw I guess not too recently, before then, I saw they did a concert in Eastern Washington. And so I posted on their Facebook why don't you guys ever come west of the mountains? You're always going to Eastern Washington. I wish you guys would go to Western Washington so I could see you guys. So I have seen them twice before already. But it seems like they always go to Eastern Washington 3, 4, 5 hours away. So a few months later, they posted a list of concerts, and so I kind of browse it as I always do, looking for Washington and just imagining I'm going to see Eastern Washington. And they mentioned instead basically the town I grew up in, my hometown basically, and it's 20 minutes from my house. And they were playing a concert there on my birthday. So it's just crazy that they happened to do a concert in basically my hometown, 20 minutes from my house, on my birthday. So pretty much right away, I booked one of the VIP tours. Basically, you get to go on their bus and hang out with the guys in the band and talk with them and ask them questions and hear an unreleased song. And just have a meet and greet and all that. And so yeah, I did that. And so a few days ago, I guess last week, that happened. So that was real cool. So the concert was Magdalene Rose, who kind of does pop music, but also some growling stuff. And I really actually like her music. I don't know, it just seems real cheerful to me. Just having kind of the pop-ish sound, sort of like a Pat Benatar-esque sound. I don't know, it's just kind of uplifting to me. And then she'll also do growling parts. So if you want to check out one of her songs, I guess check out her song Shark Spray. I really like that song. Real unique music, not exactly something I'd listen to, especially the growling stuff. I'm not too much of a fan of that, even though there are a couple bands I like who do that, like Duran Gray. I saw them in concert, and also Asking Alexandria. I really like that band. I saw them in concert with Shinedown and Godsmack. I went for Shinedown and Godsmack, but it wound up being Asking Alexandria was the one who really won me over, and they're one of my favorite bands now. Anyway, so Magdalene Rose was first, and then there was Seventh Day Slumber. When I saw that Seventh Day Slumber was in the concert as well, I kind of freaked out, because Seventh Day Slumber was a band I knew about probably before I even knew about Disciple. So I mean, I don't know, 20 years ago, I knew about Seventh Day Slumber. I heard them a lot. I heard a lot of their music. So I kind of freaked out, wow, Seventh Day Slumber too. That's kind of cool. And then Disciple, of course. So I got a couple signed posters as well, after the concert. So I got a signed poster by Magdalene Rose, and I also got a signed poster by one of the guys in Seventh Day Slumber. I think it's the drummer, and I think the drummer is the son of the lead singer of Seventh Day Slumber, and I think is also the husband of Magdalene Rose. So he was the only one who was signing that I saw after the concert. And at first I kind of thought, I was kind of disappointed in a way that I bought the poster because of only having one signature. But now I kind of think I'm almost kind of glad in a small way, because I guess I got the signature of the person who I like, if that makes sense, because I really value people who take the time to sign. So if people do not do autographs, that kind of lowers my respect for them. But if people take the time to do autographs, that makes me really like them more, because I'm such a sucker for signatures. So the fact that the drummer, I think, signed it, and it's the son of the lead singer and the husband of Magdalene Rose, I think, that kind of makes me like that guy a lot more. So I don't really have the poster so much like a signed Seventh Day Slumber poster. To me, it's more a signed poster by, I think, the drummer of Seventh Day Slumber. Because right now, of course, he is more the one in the band I like, because he's the one who was signing after the show. So to me, right away, he's more one of the cooler guys in the band. So I'm glad I got his signature, if that makes sense. And I got a signed poster by Disciple. That's something you get as part of the tour experience thing. And also after the concert, Kevin Young, the lead singer of Disciple, like tore off the set list and like threw it down kind of to the audience, and I wound up getting it. So I got the set list from the show, and I also, after the show, I took it to the table where they were like gonna sign stuff. I was actually second in line for that, and so I just had them sign the set list as well. So that's real cool as well. So that was a real fun experience to have that experience on my birthday, coming to basically my hometown, 20 minutes from my house, going on the tour bus, hanging out with the band for an hour, listening to a song that's unreleased. It's just a real cool experience, getting those signatures, getting the set list and all that. Real fun experience. But anyway, in terms of writing and editing, first I'll start with writing. I've tried to begin working on Grace's Will, which is the second draft of a book I've been working on for like 15 years, real sporadically. I kind of want that to be the next book I write. In terms of like the writing stage, I kind of break all my writing down into two phases. There's books I'm writing and books I'm editing. So Grace's Will is kind of the next book I want to write a draft of. But also in the meantime, I have 3 books that are currently in the editing stage. So not in any particular order. Ow, I just hit myself. There's Arabian Dawn, which is book 5 in the Trevor Knight series. I've already posted this on the channel, I think. Yeah, I've already mentioned all the edits I'm doing on this book. I've posted editing explained video of this book. So what I need to do for this book is make the actual changes into the computer. And that's kind of a time-consuming task. It's kind of arduous, it's exhausting. So there's that going on, making the changes into the computer. That is the 4th draft of this book, the first edit of this book. Next, this is kind of a sneak peek, I guess, because I have not shown you guys this book at all yet. And I'm Bird. I'm actually going to film a video for this book where I basically unbox this book and show it to you guys, but this is kind of just going to be a sneak peek. But it's Keeping Fire, the 3rd book in the Samuel Creed series. So I just got this pretty recently. So this is also going to be the 4th draft where I'm beginning to edit the book. So I'm, oh, how far am I into it? 30 pages or so, and it's pretty messy because this is the first edit of the book. Look at that page. That's a real lot of edits there. I did not really think this book would have as many edits as it does, because I thought this book was in pretty decent shape, except I guess for the first half of the book, because the first half of the book I wrote or worked on maybe like a year ago. So it kind of has some more of my older writing habits, things that I don't do anymore really as much. So I'm having to get rid of a lot of that, but in spite of that, so far I'm finding a lot of things I want to fix. And I'm sorry the bird is kind of being a little bit noisier. I do not mind that there's a lot of red ink on the book, because I view that as a good thing, because I already like this book pretty well. Bird, he's playing with something. So when I see all this red ink, I just view it as the book is getting that much better. So I like it. I like covering my books in red ink. So this is, again, is the 4th draft, the first edit of Keeping Fire, the 3rd book in the Samuel Creed series. Oh, I'm also really kind of procrastinating working on this. Usually I love editing. I love covering these books in red ink. But for this one, I've really struggled with it because basically the plot of this book is about the Chibok schoolgirl kidnappings in Nigeria, a real event where Boko Haram, this terrorist group in Nigeria, kidnapped several hundred Christian girls from a school. So absolutely based on real events. And so like one of the characters is one of the girls in that school who is kidnapped, you know, a fictional character, but you know, these are based on real life events. Real people go through this stuff. So it's really difficult writing that and just going through any of that. It's real difficult reading that and real difficult editing that. I just kind of dread all of those scenes with this character because, you know, these girls are being assaulted and stuff. So it's just real difficult to do that because it's not something I want to work on, you know? It's just, you know, emotionally difficult. So because of that, you know, I've really struggled editing this book. Whenever I run into one of her scenes, I pretty much stop working on it for several days or even several weeks because I just don't want to work on that scene, you know? Fortunately, like halfway through the book, her scenes do kind of end and it goes into the other character, Samuel Creed. So once I can get like halfway through the book, I'll get through most of her scenes. So that will help, you know, get me through the book quicker, but really taking my time on it, real difficult to, you know, read those scenes and work on those scenes. Lastly, this is also a new book for me, but it's not going to be new on the channel, but it's the 6th draft of Ottoman Destiny. So previously I've shown you guys several edits I've made to this book. So recently I finished making the corrections into the computer. So I ordered another copy of the book. So, you know, this is the 6th draft. So going through it again, I began with the 3rd act of the book. So I do 7 drafts for all my books. So this is the 6th draft. So when I started, I was really making only sporadic changes, like maybe 1 or 2 corrections per page. And I was thinking, okay, this is looking more like it's, you know, closer to a final draft, you know, only 1 or 2 corrections per page. But the last few chapters, I've had more like 8 corrections per page, which I do like because I like making edits to the book because it gets that much better, but I don't really like that I still have that many changes per page because by this point I would like to only have like 1, 2, or 3 corrections per page because that just shows me that the book is closer to being published. You know, it's as good as I could possibly make it for now. But the fact that I have like 8 corrections per page is kind of like, ew. Am I going to have to do another, you know, an 8th draft of this book? I'm pretty sure I won't, but because I'm still going to do another draft after this. But yeah. Anyway, it's going well. I do like it, but just like with the previous book, this book, the ending especially, is so difficult for me because of the way the book ends. I know how it ends. I do not really want to read it because I'm going to cry. This is one of the more tragic books I've written. The ending is just so sad. I know I shouldn't say that because people are going to be like, oh, I'm not going to read it then. People aren't going to read it anyway, probably. But yeah, it's real difficult to do because it's just the ending is just so emotional. I don't want to do that. And since I'm beginning on the 3rd act, pretty much everything from that point on starts to get real serious and some real bad things start happening and real sad stuff. Why do I do this to myself? Why do I write such tragic books that I struggle with? I don't know. It's just, I like writing this stuff. Oh, I gotta go. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.
2, 3, 4.